He walked into Monday's meeting with his inherited Rolex and the smile of a new CEO who thought he was the main character in Succession. He thought firing me would demonstrate his power. But he didn't know he had just triggered a $5 million bomb in my contract. I left with only a small potted plant and a secret clause that could sink the entire executive team. My name is Danielle Rourke. At 45, I'd spent 17 years as the vice president of finance at Ferndale Solutions, watching the company grow from a scrappy tech startup to a respectable mid-market player with global aspirations. I'd survived 3 CEOs, 2 market crashes, and 1 particularly nasty internal power struggle that nearly tore the company apart. But apparently, I wasn't going to survive Grayson Vale. Grayson was 32, with perfect teeth, hair styled to look casually disheveled at a cost of $400 per appointment, and the unearned confidence that comes from being the founder's son. Eleanor Vale had built Ferndale from nothing, transforming her vision into a company valued at just under $1 billion. Her son, however, had spent most of his 20s finding himself at exclusive clubs in Ibiza and dabbling in various startups that mysteriously folded after a year or 2 of burning through investor cash. When Eleanor announced her retirement last month, the board's decision to name Grayson as her successor raised eyebrows throughout the industry, mine included. But Eleanor insisted he was ready, that he'd matured, and that his fresh perspective was exactly what Ferndale needed as we approached the milestone of becoming a unicorn. I should have seen it coming. New CEOs often want to make a statement. They want to show they're not afraid to make tough calls. They want to demonstrate control. But I never thought I'd be the example. The Q3 strategy meeting was underway in our glass-walled conference room overlooking Seattle's skyline. The entire executive team was present, 12 of us, seated around a table that cost more than my first car. I was midway through my financial projections slide when Grayson interrupted. "Thank you, Danielle. That's enough." His voice cut through the room like a knife. I looked up from my notes, confused. "I'm sorry I haven't covered the APAC region's performance yet. And there are some concerning trends in—" "That won't be necessary," he said, leaning back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "In fact, we won't be requiring your services at all moving forward." The room went silent. I felt 12 pairs of eyes on me as my brain struggled to process what was happening. "I'm sorry." "What exactly are you saying?" I asked, though I knew perfectly well. Grayson smiled, that practiced, perfect smile that never quite reached his eyes. "I'm saying you're fired, Danielle, effective immediately." Marcus, our COO, nearly choked on his water. Priya from legal looked like she'd been slapped. Even James from marketing, who'd been checking his phone under the table for the past 20 minutes, suddenly snapped to attention. "May I ask why?" My voice remained steady, which seemed to irritate Grayson. He'd clearly expected tears, pleading, or at least visible shock. "We're taking the company in a new direction. Your conservative approach to finance doesn't align with our vision for aggressive growth." He gestured vaguely toward the door. "HR will walk you through the details. Security will help you clear your office." I looked around the table at my colleagues, people I'd worked alongside for years. Some avoided my gaze. Others looked genuinely distressed. Priya was frantically writing something on her legal pad, likely realizing the HR nightmare unfolding in real time. I should have been devastated, shocked, angry. Instead, I felt an odd sense of calm washing over me. "I see," I said, gathering my notes and standing. "Then I won't take up any more of the meeting's time." "That's it." Grayson looked almost disappointed at my composure. "Nothing else to say." I allowed myself a small smile. "Just that my contract has some interesting provisions you might want to review. Good luck with the rest of the meeting." As I walked out, leaving my presentation unfinished on the screen, I heard Grayson laugh and say to the room, "And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how we trim the dead wood." I knew something Grayson didn't, something that not even Priya in legal was fully aware of. 6 years ago, After I uncovered a seven-figure financial irregularity in our Canadian branch, one that could have triggered serious regulatory consequences, Eleanor Vale had personally added a special clause to my employment contract. Clause 9B. Buried in the fine print, specified that in the event of my termination without documented cause, a mandatory independent third-party audit would automatically be triggered within 72 hours. The clause was Eleanor's way of ensuring that financial oversight wouldn't be compromised by internal politics. "You're my firewall, Danielle," she had told me then. "If someone's foolish enough to remove you without good reason, I want to make damn sure they haven't been cooking the books." At the time, it seemed like an unusual but ultimately symbolic gesture. Today, it was about to become Grayson Vale's worst nightmare. Security met me at my office door, two men I'd never seen before, wearing dark suits and earpieces, as if I were some kind of corporate terrorist risk instead of a middle-aged woman in sensible heels who knew where all the financial bodies were buried. "You have 30 minutes to collect personal items," the taller one informed me. I nodded, unlocked my door, and stepped inside the space I'd occupied for over a decade. My degrees hung on the wall alongside framed graphs showing Ferndale's growth trajectory, photos of company retreats and holiday parties, a small collection of succulents on the windowsill. 17 years of my professional life to be boxed up in half an hour. I didn't need that long. I took my plant, a framed photo of my late father, and the custom fountain pen Eleanor had given me on my 10th anniversary with the company. Everything else could stay. I had what I needed in my head and in the cloud, where I'd meticulously documented every questionable decision, every corner cut, every red flag I'd raised, only to be overruled. As I signed the termination papers presented by a nervous HR representative, I noticed my hands weren't shaking. My signature was as steady as it had been on thousands of financial reports and approvals over the years. The HR rep, a young woman named Tasha who I'd helped hire just last year, couldn't meet my eyes. "I'm so sorry, Danielle," she whispered. We didn't know until this morning." "It's not your fault," I assured her. "But you might want to update your resume. Things are about to get interesting around here." She looked confused, but I just smiled and handed back the signed paperwork. "One copy for me, please," I said. "For my records." When I arrived home, I didn't cry or rage or call friends to vent. Instead, I opened my personal safe, retrieved a sealed envelope Eleanor had given me years ago, and broke the wax seal. Inside was a private email address and a simple instruction: "In case of emergency." I scanned my termination papers and contract, attached them to a new email, and typed a brief message. "Clause 9B has been activated. No cause was given for termination. No signature needed, no emotional plea. Let the contract do the talking." I sent the email, closed my laptop, and poured myself a glass of the 18-year-old Macallan I'd been saving for a special occasion. This qualified. As I savored the whiskey, I opened my work phone one last time before it would inevitably be remotely wiped. I had 17 new messages from colleagues expressing shock, asking what happened, offering support or connections to other jobs. None from Grayson, of course, but interestingly, none from Eleanor either. I finished my drink, turned off the phone, and went to bed early. Tomorrow would take care of itself. The wheels were already in motion. Wednesday morning, I woke to a text from an unknown number. "The Eagles have landed. M. Miles Durant." My former intern who had gone on to become one of the most respected forensic auditors in the Pacific Northwest. Eleanor's choice for handling sensitive financial investigations. I checked the financial news. Nothing about Ferndale yet, but it was early. I made coffee, settled into my home office, and waited. By noon, I had a more detailed message from Miles. "Full team on site, resistance at the front door, but legal documents prevailed. Initial access granted to all systems. Preliminary findings. Concerning." I could imagine the scene: a team of auditors arriving unannounced, presenting legal documents to a confused receptionist. Calls to legal. Priya reading the fine print of my contract for the first time, realizing the bomb that had been lurking there for years. Grayson's disbelief turning to anger. By mid-afternoon, the first industry whispers began appearing online. A comment in a finance forum. Anyone know what's happening at Ferndale Herd? There's a team of auditors swarming the place. A tweet from a tech reporter. Sources say major shakeup at Ferndale Solutions following surprise firing of longtime VP Finance. Developing? At 4:13 p.m., my home phone rang. The caller ID showed Vale, Eleanor. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Hello, Eleanor. Danielle. Her voice was as composed as always. I think we need to talk. I believe your son's the one who needs to talk. To the auditors. A pause. You know I would have handled this differently. Do I? Another pause. The Golden Crescent. 7 p.m. Just us. She hung up before I could agree or refuse. It didn't matter. We both knew I would be there. The Golden Crescent was a small, exclusive cafe tucked away in a historic building downtown. The kind of place where the wealthy and powerful could have conversations without being overheard or interrupted. Eleanor was already seated at a corner table when I arrived. A pot of tea steaming between 2 porcelain cups. She looked older than when I'd last seen her a month ago. Still elegant in her tailored suit, silver hair in a perfect bob. But there was a weariness around her eyes that makeup couldn't quite conceal. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. Curiosity got the better of me, I replied, pouring myself some tea. Eleanor studied me for a moment. You're not going to ask why I didn't stop him. Would you have? Probably not. Her honesty was refreshing, at least. He's the CEO now. The board approved his leadership. I had to let him lead, even if I disagreed with his methods. Even when those methods included publicly humiliating someone who's been loyal to your company for 17 years. She had the grace to look uncomfortable. Grayson has always had a flair for the dramatic. He wanted to make a statement. Oh, he made one. I sipped my tea. Just not the one he intended. Eleanor leaned forward. What have the auditors found? I raised an eyebrow. You know I'm not involved in the audit. That would defeat the purpose of an independent investigation. But Miles reports to you. Miles reports to the contract. To the board, not to me. I set my cup down. But you're asking, which means you're worried. What should they be finding? Eleanor. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she asked, if you were still CFO, what would you do with whatever they're uncovering? I'm not CFO, I was VP of Finance. There's a difference. Semantics. Details. I've always paid attention to the details. I met her gaze steadily. That's why I was valuable. That's why Clause 9b exists. Eleanor sighed. Grayson is impulsive, creative with resources, but he has vision. Vision without fiscal responsibility is just expensive fantasy. I leaned back in my chair. But you didn't bring me here to debate management styles. What do you want, Eleanor? I want to know what your endgame is. The question surprised me. I considered it for a moment. I don't have an endgame. I didn't trigger this situation. Your son did. The audit is proceeding according to the legally binding agreement you personally approved. Whatever happens next depends on what the auditors find and what the board decides to do about it. Eleanor's expression hardened slightly. We both know that's not entirely true. Miles respects you. The board trusts your judgment. If you wanted to influence the outcome. Are you asking me to interfere with an independent audit? I'm asking what you want, Danielle, reinstatement compensation, a public apology. I studied her face. Despite everything, I still respected Eleanor Vale. She had built something remarkable, guided by a genuine vision and formidable intelligence. Her only blind spot seemed to be her son. What I want, I said carefully, is for Ferndale to survive. I've invested too much of my life in this company to watch it implode because of one man's ego. Eleanor nodded slowly. On that, we are aligned. Are we? Because survival might require difficult decisions. About leadership, she didn't flinch. If the situation is as serious as you're implying, what would you recommend? That would depend on exactly what the audit reveals, wouldn't it? Before she could respond, her phone chimed. She glanced at it, and her expression changed, a subtle tightening around the mouth, a flicker of genuine concern in her eyes. "Excuse me," she said, rising from the table. "I need to take this." As she stepped away to take the call, my own phone vibrated with a message from Miles. "Board emergency meeting called for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Full preliminary report ready. You should be there." Eleanor returned, her composure slightly fractured. "I need to go. But this conversation isn't over." "No," I agreed. "It's just beginning." The Ferndale Solutions boardroom looked different from the visitor's chair. I'd presented to the board countless times, but always as an insider, part of the executive team. Today, I was an outsider, the whistleblower, the disruptor, the problem. 8 board members sat around the massive table, expressions ranging from concern to outright hostility. Eleanor occupied her chair as board chair, face unreadable. Grayson sat at the opposite end, jaw clenched, glaring at me as if his gaze alone could make me burst into flames. Between us stood Miles Durant, impeccable in his charcoal suit, a stack of folders before him. On the wall screen behind him, the Ferndale logo pulsed gently, soon to be replaced by whatever damning evidence his team had uncovered in just 48 hours. "Let's call this emergency meeting to order," Eleanor began, her voice steady. "We're here to review the preliminary findings of the independent audit triggered by Clause 9B of Ms. Rourke's employment contract. Mr. Durant, you have the floor." Miles nodded, professional and detached. "Thank you, Ms. Vale. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, my team has conducted an expedited but thorough examination of Ferndale's financial activities over the past 24 months, with particular focus on executive approvals, special projects, and discretionary spending accounts." He tapped his tablet, and the screen behind him filled with charts and figures. "What we found indicates a pattern of financial irregularities that, if left unaddressed, could expose the company to significant regulatory risk and shareholder liability." "This is ridiculous," Grayson interrupted. "You've had 2 days. There's no way you could have conducted a proper audit in that time." Miles turned to him calmly. "Mr. Vale, we've had full access to all financial systems as specified in the contract. We've utilized advanced analytics and forensic accounting tools. And, most importantly, we've had the cooperation of numerous Ferndale employees who have come forward with information." That silenced Grayson momentarily, and Miles continued, clicking through to specific examples. The innovation fund Grayson had established shortly after taking over ostensibly to foster new product development had been used for a wide range of questionable expenses, $287,000 for a meditation retreat in Bailey. That company records showed was actually a vacation with several Instagram models. $1.2 million in transferred to shell companies connected to a crypto startup run by Grayson's college roommate. Over $500,000 in consultant fees to entities that appeared to have no deliverables or work product. Most damning of all, multiple transactions had been approved using the digital signatures of employees who had left the company years ago, a serious violation of financial controls and potentially fraudulent. As Miles methodically laid out the evidence, I watched the board members' reactions: shock, disbelief, anger. Grayson's face had gone from red to white, his earlier bravado evaporating with each new slide. "This is just a preliminary report," Miles concluded. "The full audit will take another 2 weeks. However, given the nature of what we've already uncovered, I felt it necessary to brief the board immediately on these findings." Eleanor spoke first, her voice tight with controlled fury. "Grayson, what do you have to say about this?" He rallied, forcing a dismissive laugh. "This is clearly a vendetta. Danielle was upset about being fired and orchestrated this whole thing to make me look bad. Ms. Rourke has had no involvement in the audit process. Miles countered. And these transactions occurred long before her termination. The Innovation Fund was established to take risks, Grayson insisted, looking around the table for support. To move quickly without bureaucracy, that's what disruptors do. Barbara Chen, our longest-serving board member, removed her glasses slowly. Disruptors don't embezzle. Grayson, they don't falsify approvals or funnel company money to their friends. I didn't. Slide 17, please, Barbara interrupted, addressing Miles. He brought up the requested slide, showing a series of transfers to something called Vail Legacy Trust. Would you care to explain why company funds were moved to what appears to be your personal trust? She asked Grayson. His eyes darted around the room. That was a temporary transfer. For tax purposes, it was coming back. With what documentation? What approval? Barbara pressed. I'm the CEO, I don't need. Eleanor cut him off. Yes, you do. Even I needed board approval for transfers above certain thresholds. That's Governance 101. The room fell silent. I sat quietly, watching the implosion I hadn't created but had certainly enabled. Part of me took no pleasure in it. Another part, the part that had been humiliated in front of colleagues, escorted out by security, treated as disposable after 17 years of service, felt a grim satisfaction. Finally, Eleanor turned to me. Danielle, why are you here? What do you want from this meeting? All eyes turned to me, including Grayson's, now filled with a mixture of hatred and fear. I'm here because Miles invited me, as the person whose contract triggered the audit. I met Eleanor's gaze. As for what I want Ferndale to survive this. We have thousands of employees whose livelihoods depend on this company. We have customers who rely on our products. We have a responsibility to them. Very noble, Grayson sneered. But you're just another disgruntled ex-employee now. I ignored him, addressing the board directly. The audit has revealed serious problems, but they're fixable. With proper financial controls, transparency, and the right leadership, Ferndale can recover. But it will require decisive action. What are you suggesting? Asked Robert Thompson, another board member. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm observing that you have evidence of financial mismanagement that could trigger regulatory investigations, shareholder lawsuits, and irreparable reputational damage. The board's fiduciary duty is clear. Eleanor studied me for a long moment, then turned to the board's legal counsel. Jeffrey, what are our options here? The lawyer cleared his throat. Given the preliminary findings, the board would be justified in temporarily suspending Mr. Owers, Vail pending the full audit. We could appoint an interim CEO to stabilize the situation. This is insane. Grayson slammed his hand on the table. You can't remove me based on some witch hunt audit triggered by her. He jabbed a finger toward me. I made one decision to fire an underperforming executive, and now you want to oust me? I'm a Vail. This company has my name. Actually, Eleanor said quietly, it has my name. I just let you borrow it. The room went still. In that moment, the power dynamic shifted visibly. Eleanor Vail might have stepped down as CEO, but she remained the largest individual shareholder and the board chair. And she had just signaled which way the wind was blowing. I move that we temporarily suspend Grayson Vail from his duties as CEO, pending completion of the financial audit, Barbara Chen said formally. Second, added Robert Thompson. Those in favor, Eleanor asked. 7 hands went up immediately. The 8th board member, a venture capitalist who had been Grayson's most vocal supporter, hesitated before slowly raising his hand as well. Unanimous, Eleanor declared. Grayson Vail is hereby suspended, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. Grayson stood, knocking his chair backward. You'll regret this, all of you. His gaze fixed on me. Especially you, Danielle. You think you've won? This isn't over. As security entered the room, responding to a discreet button Eleanor had pressed, Grayson grabbed his phone and stalked out, the guards following close behind. In the silence that followed, Eleanor turned to the board. We need an interim CEO, Someone who understands our finances, has institutional knowledge, and can stabilize the situation while we complete the audit. All eyes turned to me again. No, I said immediately. I was VP of Finance, not Operations. And I just triggered an audit that threw the company into chaos. I'm hardly a unifying figure right now. You're exactly what we need, Barbara insisted. You know where the bodies are buried. You can help us fix this. I shook my head. I appreciate the vote of confidence, but I was fired 3 days ago, rather publicly. My coming back would send a mixed message. What would it take? Eleanor asked directly. To get you to come back and help us through this, I considered the question carefully. Full authority to implement proper financial controls, a board mandate to pursue recovery of any misappropriated funds, complete transparency with employees about what happened and what we're doing to fix it, and a public statement clarifying the circumstances of my departure and return. That's a lot to ask. The venture capitalist board member objected. You're in damage control mode, I replied. This isn't about saving face anymore. It's about saving the company. Before anyone could respond, my phone buzzed with a notification. An employee had anonymously forwarded me a message from a group chat called Ferndale Brobos, Grayson's Inner Circle. There on my screen was a message from Grayson himself, sent just minutes ago. The old bitch thinks she won. Wait till she sees what happens when I release everything to the press. Danielle Rourke. More like Danielle Roadkill when I'm done with her. I placed my phone face up on the table, sliding it toward Eleanor. She read the message, her expression hardening. Your terms are accepted, she said, looking up at me. Unanimous consent. The board nodded in agreement. Then it settled. Danielle Rourke is appointed interim CEO, effective immediately, with the full authority she has requested. Eleanor stood, extending her hand to me. The company is in your hands now. Don't make me regret this. I stood and shook her hand, sealing the most unexpected career move of my life. I'll do what needs to be done. Whether you regret it or not will depend on how committed you are to real change. As the board members filed out, Miles approached me with another folder. There's something else you should see. We found it just before the meeting. Inside was documentation of a $56,000 payment for an innovation summit in Oslo that had never happened. The money had gone directly to a luxury villa rental, again through the Vale Legacy Trust. This one has Eleanor's digital signature on it, Miles said quietly. Not Grayson's. I closed the folder. Thank you, Miles. Continue the audit. Every transaction, every approval, no matter whose signature is on it. He nodded and left. I remained alone in the boardroom, looking out at the Seattle skyline through the wall of windows. 17 years at Ferndale had taken me from a junior financial analyst to interim CEO in the most chaotic way possible. I hadn't sought this position. I hadn't even sought revenge. Really. I'd simply refused to be discarded without consequence. Now I had to decide what to do with the power I'd unexpectedly gained. Clean house completely. Try to salvage what was good while excising the rot. And what about Eleanor's apparent involvement? The depth of the problems was still emerging, and I had no illusions about the challenges ahead. My phone buzzed again, a company-wide email from Eleanor announcing my appointment as interim CEO. The responses were already flooding in confusion, surprise, relief from some, resistance from others. Grayson's allies would not go quietly. I gathered my things and walked to what would now be my office, the CEO's corner suite with its commanding views and weighty responsibilities. The same security team that had escorted me out days earlier now held the door open for me, their expressions carefully neutral. On the desk was a small potted succulent, one of mine, rescued from my old office with a note in Eleanor's handwriting, from small things, growth, do what needs to be done. I set the plant on the windowsill and took a seat in the chair that had held 3 CEOs before me. The company's future now rested largely in my hands that had been steady when signing my termination papers, and remained steady now as I prepared to sign my first executive orders as CEO. I opened my laptop and began to type. To all Ferndale employees, I know many of you are confused by recent events. 3 days ago, I was fired. Today, I am your interim CEO. Both events stem from the same root cause: financial irregularities that threaten the company's future. I am not returning to maintain the status quo. I am not here to preserve anyone's reputation or position. I am here to do what I have always done: protect Ferndale's financial integrity and ensure its long-term survival. In the coming days, you will learn more about the issues we face and the changes we must make. Some will be difficult, some may be painful, but all are necessary. I ask for your patience, your honesty, and your commitment to our shared future. The audit begins now, not just of our finances, but of our culture, our leadership, and our values. Danielle Rourke, Interim CEO, Ferndale Solutions. I hit send, leaned back in my new chair, and watched as red receipts began to populate my screen. No turning back now. The real work was just beginning.